There's Carl.
Hello, Kathryn.
How are you?
I'm okay. How are you?
I am good. Just did a really nice interview with Bart with Hart.
Oh. Were you who was the interview and who was the interviewer or whatever? You were interviewing him?
No, he was interviewing me.
Oh,
So we did a nice talk. It was about 2 hours.
wow.
Yeah. I think there's only an hour recording, but we were together 2 hours talking about different things and stuff. So it was good. It was good.
Um, was it?
It's on the biotic pump.
Oh, yeah. So I was feeling a little embarrassed. Like, is it about the biotic pump? Like, I didn't want to sound like, well, of course you're always talking about the biotic.
Yes, yes, it was. Yeah, and it's really interesting to see how Bart approaches it. Um,
The heart.
Hart, yeah, Hart, how Hart approaches it.
I
Um,
just said it to make sure because you have so many friends. So Bart, Hart,
well, yes,
yeah. What
yeah,
I
the
guess
Bart, the
what.
Bert.
You should just take up my practice. Like every time you say, go Hart Hogan, right, Hagen. Uh, so what was are we the only ones here, or is this?
So far, yeah, I haven't seen Robert. And I was a tad couple minutes late there because I'm trying to finish the and put up the Wednesday webinar. So I've kind of finessed that. So I just have to upload it and that'll be done. So that'll be good.
So what's the how much do you want to share? Can you share about this, your insights about how he interprets it, or
Oh, he interprets it. He, and that was good. I wanted to talk about that actually with him, and we didn't. I told him I wanted to talk about it, but we talked about other things. But I think there's a resistance for him seeing it as a system. And he sees all the pieces and he talks about all the pieces and parts, but he doesn't really get the system. And I hope because I could hear a couple of ahas as I talked. So maybe that will seat in a different way. Um, he, I think, finally really got the importance of soil. Not that soil was ever unimportant, but I don't think he saw it as key to the system as it is, which was one of my goals. So
did
that,
well, these conversations we've had about um how people don't see the system. I
Mhm.
think I see it. Um, or how this or seeing anyway. The conversation about systems, not system, the parts, and how, the parts as a system. It's a pretty important conversation, but it's also really interesting how what we've been talking about is how people some people see the trees and shade. Some people see rivers, they don't see water. Um,
yeah.
um,
So maybe what I'm gathering from what you're saying is maybe I should actually start things more with from that systems perspective. Just a couple of things. That systems are wholes, they're composed of parts. The parts are all independent, but all affect the whole all the time, but at different times. And they can't be interchanged. Parts from one system can't be put into another system.
well,
I mean, those are really basic.
when I was saying what I was when I was where my head is, when my thinking is I mean I wasn't thinking, well, you need to talk like this. I was thinking
I
that
know.
like the way to talk about it is at least for me is evolving, and I
Well,
and I suppose maybe for you for you as well,
mhm,
and
I hope so.
because we often talk about like how come people don't see it,
Yeah, yeah.
and that's the question. It's like why don't they see it?
Yeah, yeah, and that's kind of what I wanted to engage Hart in, uh, is is that. But I don't think he wanted to do that publicly, which is okay. But I may circle around.
Publicly, you mean in these other meetings or between just you and him or
Well, no, in a public forum like a
yeah.
podcast, which is what we were doing. Hey,
Oh,
Robert.
okay.
Good. Hello. Good morning to you.
Yes, yes. Good afternoon to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're just talking. I was interviewed on a podcast this morning, so we were just talking about that process. So I get to talk about the biotic pump one more time. And so I did my slides and he did his slides and we talked about stuff. So it'll be interesting to see how he puts it all together. Um, yeah. So I guess the question maybe for the morning is why don't people see systems? Because that's really what Carl and I were talking about, that when I talk about the biotic pump, they'll hear trees, they'll hear rain. They kind of miss soil. And if they hear about soil, they go, yeah, it's important, but they don't get how important it is, that the system won't work without that piece. I mean, it just doesn't. And I think that was something that did come through today for the guy that was interviewing me, that he kind of made that connection, because I don't think he'd quite made that connection either. But it begs the question, why don't they see the system? They see the parts just fine. None of the parts are a surprise. It's things people know about, have.
I mean, it should just mention to Robert that this is the guy who loves to talk about his garden and in the
Oh, and he's a real expert on natural stuff. He's no slouch
yeah.
by any means. And he's talked about parts of the pump, but he mentions it occasionally. But he admits that he's uncomfortable with it. It doesn't quite seat for him. And so we were wondering about the system piece, that maybe that's the missing link, that it's still just parts in his head and it's not coalesced into a whole.
Well, maybe it's the old quantum theory problem. When particles start acting like waves, it gets very disturbing. So,
Whoa.
and in this case,
wait.
I just thought I'd get us thinking in the right direction. I want to talk about life. Nobody really understands life. It's magical.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
scientists don't really understand because it's all systems. It's multiples of systems jumbled together, systems upon systems, systems of systems.
Yes.
It's totally unperceivable by the mental apparatus that we call our intelligence.
Yeah.
It has not fathomed.
My mind is still stuck on your statement was particles start acting like waves. Is that the?
Yeah.
Well, that's the old part, the mystery behind quantum mechanics, and it's
Wait, but that's what you said. The part when particles start acting like waves.
right. Or
I just want to I want to write that down correctly
they are indistinguishable from waves depending on how you look at them. They will turn out either to be a wave or a particle. In other words, they respond to consciousness, however we want to, seemingly. I would think it's more that our consciousness responds to the mystery by, defining what's happening in a specific way.
Yeah, there's something about noticing, about seeing, about making a choice that
Right.
makes
Well, I mean,
things real.
the types of experiments are, they use slits in a wall, a wall that's a barrier that's placed between, let's say, a proton gun and a target background that that records where the proton hits. And if there's just one slit and the proton fires right directly through that slit, you just see, what you would expect, a small pattern of proton hits on the target in direct line. But when you start to put slits in various ways, and so you're firing against one of the solid parts, not the slit directly, or even if it's indirect, suddenly you get impressions on the target as if that proton were going through all of them at once, all the slits you have. So you get an array, and that follows wave, because waves act that way when you're using water instead of shooting protons. And you just, motivate water to run through a slits, you will get rippled patterns.
So let me ask that question. So so you're firing the proton gun through these slits,
Yes.
and I don't know if this is possible. If you only shoot one proton through
It'll
the
show
slits,
Do
it shows
that.
up as,
Yes.
so that's the particle acting like a wave.
Right.
Yes.
So it's literally, it's like to shoot one proton is they can shoot one proton like you shoot one bullet.
Yeah, if there's nothing interfering.
Right.
But if that slit's thin enough, even if the proton could seemingly get through, it doesn't. It turns into a wave.
But it gets also weirder because you can look at a slit and the proton will go through that slit.
Yeah, well, yeah, and there are variations. I was just trying to simplify to one, but yeah, there are variations. I mean,
Are these slits different widths?
But it
Is
has
that a stupid question?
I'm sure it's been played with in so many different ways, but
yeah, the particle and wave thing is just amazing.
but my point is that there's a certain feeling of magic about the whole thing. The magic of life, the magic of material things.
In consciousness. Well, to be ornery, because I'm already being ornery.
Consciousness perceives this, and so that's my point. I hope we've undergirded
Well,
it.
I was going to say maybe the way you phrase that is not that's my point. It's that's my waves. To
Okay.
broadcast to put out a wider net.
But I mean, the whole point of science is to do away with systems. I mean, it's to divide parts. And
Wait.
it doesn't work with life.
The purpose of classic or pre-20th century science.
Right.
I wasn't trying to. I would, that was really meant to be like question, but because I mean, to me that this quantum mechanics or 20th century physics is sort of that. It's about we can't. It's like you can't know something unless you can't know something unless you disturb it, and if you disturb it, you've disturbed it.
Well, and
That's
then
kind of been,
you see the content.
and that's and not to be like Carl, but that's to me like what perspective, like in some ways our perspective machines and the way we like perspective is like it's like that. I'm going to go on a limb here because I trust you.
No, you're right. It limits, it frames the way you see. It limits and controls the way you see.
Yeah.
And that's been the realization with the quantum mechanics that the minute that's Schrodinger's cat. The minute you see something, you create it. It's this interaction between the particle and the viewer that makes things solidify into what we call reality.
Right. Well, and if I have not said this to you personally, but I often say this is that, like cubism is in the spirit of quantum mechanics, which you can't, like what you just said. You just said it really beautifully. Even in the photograph where you draw something in perspective, you've interfered in it because you're imposing on a preconception onto that thing.
Yep.
And which is sort of the big question that comes out of my question, or the big point, which is this mode representation may seem objective, but it is not, and it changes.
Well, and that's the beauty, actually. That's where agency comes. because when you understand that, then you can really rethink about the frames you're putting on your experience. And you can say, oh my God, the world's falling apart. It's horrible. It's miserable. Everybody's dying. Isn't it horrible? Or you can go, oh, look, we've got change. Things are, we're in imaginal cells. We're doing all these things. You've got choice. And what you see is truly what you create. I mean, it's, yeah, I mean, that we got into that in another conversation yesterday. And this woman was feeling guilty because if she was responsible for her illnesses, then is she a bad person? What is she doing to herself? How, I mean, it was just a burden instead of seeing what a gift that is and that it's not a punishment. It's not punitive
Ugh.
by any means. It's just, and responsibility isn't a duty and a burden. It's the ability to respond. And if you have if you have options in your ability to respond, then you have options. You know, you're not constrained in any real way. And I have really seen how very true that is. I mean, so I don't tell a story often. But one of the things that my father had on his body were a lot of skin tags. And I noticed at one point that I was developing them, which was not a happy thing. It's like I'm not really excited about that. And I truly got that when I was clear that I did not want that skin tag there. And words really fail you at this point in time, but there is a connection that you have to the life, that the cells that are in that, and you're really clear that they shouldn't be there, and they go away. Period. They get it. But you have to be in that space. You can't pretend, you can't try, you can't do any of these things that are outside of it. You truly have to be one with that. And when you are, and you're clear about your intent, the world says, fine. I mean, it is magical. It is magical. And there's, for me, an incredible integrity about that. And I think that's something that we recognize in others. And I'm thinking about Foyle's War at this point.
Oh.
One of those threads that goes through Foyle's War is the sense of integrity. And it's not fixed. It's not like right or wrong or this or that. It's the finessing of what's right in this situation for this situation totally. Yeah, and that's the place to be. That's a joyous, free, just euphoric space because everybody's singing the same song. And so you're able to do melodies and, rip off each other and do all that kind of stuff and improvise, and it's fine. It works just perfectly because you have that integrity.
When you say everybody's singing the same song, is it really everybody's in that same song? People are singing
Oh,
different.
melodies and harmonies and yeah,
So people are. So then the same song, people have their own song.
yeah, exactly.
That's-
Exactly. Exactly.
Or
And
another,
it's your song that has to be there. You can't be somebody else or pretend of something that you'd like to be. It doesn't work. Robert?
I was just going to say that using the example of a song, it seems like you can really nail that down. Oh, well, we're going to sing the same notes and same, progression of the tune, and the words, use the same words. So it ought to be exactly the same. No, that couldn't be more
Yeah, it's not right. Yeah.
false. That it is absolutely filled out by, chromatic qualities of the voice and, how loud you're, there are all kinds of conditions. And what I think the fault of modern day thinking is they really think they can identify something. By doing tests, they can really identify it. And they can't, because in the cold slab of a laboratory table, maybe these bacteria will be acting in a certain way, and you can define it, and you can photograph it, and you can say that that's forever how these bacteria are going to act. But they don't do that anywhere else.
No, not in real life. No.
Well, this is, I mean, again, sorry for being. So this is the other fallacy. This is another fallacy of perspective. What's this culture? This thing in our culture, where because classical, I mean, Renaissance perspective is it's okay. It's a collection of images or whatever, but it's a frozen in time. And
Oh,
so I think that this idea of frozen in time is part of what Western science is until the 20th century. So your example your example of even if you're looking at a bacteria, it's just in a moment in time.
Right. And
But
yet, if you're together with a grouping of people who are all together in that moment, singing together, then you find that people are working to harmonize, to really make a collective experience that's in the moment. But you can't describe, you are either there or you weren't there. You can't describe it completely to anyone else who wasn't there.
uh, the to carrying that the singing analogy or metaphor, so like um singing or so that like and I think the best example is jazz improvisation.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But people who've been playing together, the really amazing improvisation comes from people who've been doing singing the same playing together for a long time.
Yeah.
And that's really I witnessed it once, not with me, just watching it. And so that's probably the best example of people seemingly playing the same thing, but they're all kind of playing separately, but and they all respect each other. They know how they the so that's maybe a really great an example of what's possible if for that to happen, then you have to have respect and trust with each other.
Oh, wow. Isn't that a tall order? I guess
To
that is
do it with
gonna
the
happen.
planet, can you imagine?
Yeah, but I also wanted to say, and this is something my wife talks about a lot because she's a conductor. So um so so with and she's getting ready for a concert, so she's talking a lot about like the tenors are falling up, not not coming through, and so I'm I'm thinking out loud. So when she's conducting a choir, and there's basically six parts, right? Bass and tenor, and or I guess four, maybe I whatever it is, and
I think you're right. It's six if you count the contra bit, or
yeah. But
instrument.
I think that typically it's four, sort of bass, tenor, alto, soprano.
Right.
Um, don't tell my wife I was struggling with that one because
Oh, you're supposed to have that totally internalized by now, huh?
um, but so sometimes they're singing and they're singing different parts, but they're singing the same song. But that sort of that singing in tune or sort of different parts is not the same as I don't think. Well, here's the question. I don't think it's exactly the same as total improvisation. And one of her jobs is to get them to sing. They're singing the same song, but they're singing kind of there's different pitches and there's things are there's some change, there's differences. But she works to get them to sing in the right pitch, so it works out.
She
Yeah.
needs to get them to listen to each other. That's all. If they listen to each other,
Well, this is that.
then they can do that.
I always hate it when I have to admit that you're right, Kathryn. But no, but that's it. So, and she talks about that, like her problem right now with the tenors is that they're not strong and they're not working out, and then that and this is so because they're weak, whatever they so they would if they miss the pitch, everything falls apart. Or if anybody falls, if so, so so they're listening to each other. But if one group gets starts off flat, everything falls apart by her standard, which is what she's trying to.
I can always tell when I listen to a choir in particular, more than an orchestra, although it happens with an orchestra too, but there's so much noise in an orchestra that it's harder for me to discern it. You can tell whether they're listening to each other or not. If in a choir, one voice rises above, they're not listening to anybody. They're doing their own thing. They're off in their own world. And it's disruptive. Even if it's a beautiful, it's still disruptive. It doesn't hold together anymore. Now, when that's the solo time, that's fine because that's the point at which that is supposed to be there. It's just, there's no director in jazz. There's no conductor in jazz. It's the band itself. It's the group itself that manages itself because they're listening to each other.
Yeah.
And when you do that, you can play with that. I mean, it's just fun. It's really fun to do that. Yeah, I think that's what life should be like. Effective teams are kind of that kind of experience where you're kind of playing with each other and nobody's in charge, nobody's telling you what to do. People just see it and respond and manage. I mean, that's a marriage, that's a family, it's all these ways of being with each other that's just joyous. You know, yeah.
If I'd like to go back to Robert's insights about quantum mechanics in this, the metaphor of the metaphor, whatever the particles and waves. Is that a way to talk about systems?
It's a very loose way. I mean, I'm not trying to say there's an equality here. All I'm saying
Well,
is,
I'm asking, is it so?
I was saying that in the sense that quantum mechanics can be thought of or visualized, reacted to as magic, or Einstein even said, spooky science, or what do you call it? Spooky
God
physics.
doesn't play dice, yeah.
Well, I think people see systems that way.
Yeah.
They see systems which way? That like spooky or
Spooky. Yeah, because
well,
you're telling me that it can't be nailed down. Come on, of course it can be nailed down. That's the whole point of our,
If it's nailed down, it's dead.
right? Of course, like Eddie Frog will tell
well,
you.
this is this is what we were talking about before you interrupted. No, this
I'm
struggling
sorry
to.
I'm late. I'm sorry I'm late.
No, I'm
Been right with you.
this you can tell I'm in a good mood because this is very interesting stuff. So this because Kathryn and I often talk about like how come they just can't see the system, right? And is it because they're in this one the guy we're talking about is very attuned and but he kind of sees the parts, but he doesn't see how they like it doesn't see the system what we're saying. And so this the inability to see the system is that an effort to try to nail it down. They like this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. To make it less confusing. The complexity, many things at once is difficult to manage, especially for some people who are very detail oriented, really like small, neat little things, like detail, all of that. When it gets too big, it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming. And the beauty for me of systems is that you can go from this little piece and then you can go to a bigger piece, but it's still a whole, it's still a piece. So you can see all the parts, but it's still a whole. So it gives you, at least it gives me sort of a feeling of of knowing where I am without being swamped by all these details. And so when you see systems, you can see these systems and understand the parts, but you don't get swallowed up by all that minutia, because you're seeing bigger parts, which are parts of the whole system. And there's just a euphoria in that. Yeah, that for me has been one of the real spiritual experiences of working with nature, is being able to see the incredible dance that life is with itself.
Euphoria and freedom. And
Yeah, yeah.
Freedom of
Trust.
expression, but yeah.
Yeah, and trust. I mean, that's where trust comes for me. You can absolutely trust life to look out for life. You can absolutely trust life to do that. It will always choose life, always, always, always. So you can absolutely trust what nature does for that reason. You may not understand it, may not make sense in the moment, but it's always about making sure that life continues.
and I think that's probably part of the hurdle for people is it's hard for them to like accept it without knowing it as much as they want to know it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's where the trust comes in, and the faith, if you will, comes in there.
Which is this that point is permeates sustainable design because like people don't trust nature. We want to put a machine on top of the building.
Yeah. 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 If we've made it, we have more trust in it, even though we shouldn't. That makes us feel it's working for us, but it's not necessarily working for life. So that's the problem.
It's like I was just talking to somebody this morning. It's like both Hart and Chad Hansen say, forests don't need protection, and which is something like you've said, what we want to be able to fix it. We want to be able to feel like we've done something, put a nail in it, and then now it's fine. Or, but we're doing more than putting nails in it.
But we can do the same, we can get the same feeling out of caring. And when we care for life and see how our care generates life and makes life thrive, you get the same feeling as you do when you put a nail in it. You really can
Oh,
feel your agency and feel your sense of control and your contribution and your value.
so,
All those things come out of that caring space.
so what you're saying, when you care, when you're really caring, you can feel that satisfaction as much as with this, well, we would say more than with, this desire to put a nail in it.
Yeah, actually, that's true. Yeah, it really hits your heart space in a way that putting a nail in it doesn't, as a rule.
Nothing against carpenters who puts nails in things, Robert.
I don't do that anymore.
Well,
Uh,
I just want you to know that I was thinking about you.
My muscles don't work very well that way with a hammer. They go out pretty quickly. So I use a screw gun.
uh, yeah, very good. Those are little signals, aren't they, really, to tell us how in line we are with things.
I mean, when the things aren't, when you're
Just getting old.
Oh, that, yeah, 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 yeah.
it's just a sidebar. Robert, we'd really love to, if Kathryn's so welcome to join us, if we could arrange a time, I could walk you through a presentation that I'm putting together.
Sure, I'd do that with
Because
you.
it's very much about wood and steel, and there's some things issues about like and we talked like how you put a nail, how do you nail a stud to a bottom plate, and it's too close, it splits, it's too far away, there's a
Still, you don't have to worry about it.
well, It's you do have to because it affects the structural part. But if you do a steel, then you know it's there's a certainty. But anyway, I'd love to, I'll send you an email if set up some times to do that because and
Sure.
and this maybe fits into what we're talking about. This is another insight that I've learned from Dawn, my steel friend, which and it's made me more clear that his knowledge about steel building comes from being a wood carpenter for so many like 20 some years. Um, which is so because we're talking about the tools you need. And he pointed out that one of the tools that the wood framers use is a what's he called, a persuader, a big sledgehammer. See how see that's the sort of stuff I want so yeah. So I'll send you an email anyway. That's
It's people just are used to, the wood.
Well,
That's
we love wood. I think we do love wood. It has an emotional attachment that I don't have to steal.
well,
I yeah,
there's a whole other thing. I mean, you
yeah,
can actually cut down trees within your own community, mill them yourself with a chainsaw mill or something, that type, um, and build the house. And all these skills are there, and you can run a business doing that, depending on few other people. Nails were always made, in some consolidated, business,
blacksmith.
that factory. But this all, that's the culture in New England that I grew up in. People could do these things. Whereas
yeah,
steel, you're just about from the beginning, you're absolutely dependent on the industrial age to supply all the
Yeah.
parts, all the tools, all the fasteners, and so forth.
well, that's a really great insight. But and this is the what I would say is but there's also the even you if, like we like the idea of milling your own lumber, like 2 out of 1 million can do that too, whatever. But there's the memory of it also. You can imagine doing it.
No, I've done it.
Oh, I know you have, but the
I
number of
think
people the
that's
number
great.
of people who've done it is pretty small.
Yeah.
But I do think it's in our species DNA to very much use what's around us to live. And we've done that for millennia, frankly. And it's only in the relatively recent modern times that we've moved away from that and been able to create things that can create so that we're removed from that experience. And I'm not sure it's a good thing. I'm not
Yeah.
sure it's terribly bad, but there's something about it being outside of us that I'm not sure it's a problem anyway.
Yeah,
Um,
this is well
I'm very uncomfortable with it.
yeah,
with
With having everything outside of myself because you
yeah,
know I,
AI.
I've been able to create my own business throughout my lifetime until recently, till about 20 years ago when I had to really succumb, to the tradition that's consistent with, a capitalist approach to, the design and building here in Atlanta. You know, um, in other words, the money making, profit making approach. Before that, it was much freer, working mostly in semi-rural or rural areas, or even city areas. Phoenix in the 70s, it was very. We did some, I was working with an architect, Vern Swabach, who had studied with Frank Lloyd Wright and actually taught for years at Taliesin West. So he would have me build his projects, which were all, with stains of different colors, very intricate work, just because it was all, had a lot of color, um, you know, invested within it. color and, using wood in very creative, different ways. So I had great fun doing that.
Well, I hope that not to sort of steer this conversation too much of this, but I mean, this is really, those are all really great insights about my quest or my questioning of this thing. But so what I would add to that is the friction or the situation we're in is that we're certainly attached to wood. I get that. But the wood we have today and everything else, how we put it together, is just very different.
Yeah.
And I guess part of my thinking is that we as architects, it's time to recognize that it's a different thing now.
Yeah, and I agree with you
Yeah.
on that score. But all I'm saying is that there is this huge tug within my heart
Well, and I
for the world
absolutely,
that I grew up in,
And I would say the species heart.
the systems that I grew up in. It was just a completely different flow. And
yeah,
unfortunately, the flow nowadays is ruled by money. And
Yeah.
the flow that I mostly knew was not ruled by money. The concept of money. I mean, people wanted to make, a decent living, but it was a living. It wasn't a profit.
Yeah.
There's a huge difference.
Kathryn, I heard your comment, the idea of that it's in our DNA, our species,
Mhm.
which I also agree with. But and the struggle is that to acknowledge that again, it's like we're in a different time.
Well, and that's a good question as to what time are we in? I don't think we know yet. And the assumption with steel is that we're actually going to continue pretty much the way we are, but shift a little bit. And I am not convinced that that's going to be
Yeah.
true.
Well, and I like not I don't want to be like the guy who just has the hammer in the toolbox, but I do think that there's a part of what Dawn does it can support the local builder
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
ways, and so that's kind of, I mean, I get that is, I'm not minimizing the point here, which is it's new to us, but one of the things I find really interesting is it compared to both the way wood is being thought about today and the normal steel building is thought about today. Dawn's process, it there's a part of it that it can support the small business guy or the
Well,
craft guy.
and moving to steel, if that actually caught on, would certainly do a lot to save the forests that we've got, which we really absolutely need to do. So, I mean, I think it's a fine thing to pursue. I just have no, um, mm, I don't know how to say it. I am just open to the understanding that it could all shift to such an extent that that's not an option also. So I
Yeah.
don't see that as a world savior. I see that as if the world makes it through enough to do that, it's a great thing to do.
Well, I would only say that the part that it feels like it could be a world saver is if it saves our forests.
Well, and it certainly could help right now. I mean, it would be an interesting conversation, and that's why I'm really supportive, especially from fire.
Yeah.
That I really think that opening people's eyes to how to manage fire from a different perspective and not to see it as the the fault of the forest that it's burning and therefore we have to tame the forest so it doesn't burn. None of these fires, or very few of these fires, are really forest fires. They're really fires, grass fires that have gotten into the houses, or ember fires that have gotten into houses, and have very little to do with trees and forest, frankly. So understanding that, I think, is just really important. I mean, all of this, getting back to reality, to really see how things are connected, to really see what makes a difference in something, is because we're so mired in these myths and stories and illusions that we've been telling ourselves. There's just nothing real about so much of our world, and it's just not working, you know? So getting out of that, anything that gets us out of that is a good thing.
Another thing, back to Robert's comment about that everything's ruled by money. It's I also not at all disagreeing with that, but it's also there's another component to that is the time thing, the time element,
Yes.
and maybe this, but the confusion comes from we now mistake time for money.
Well, the time there. Yes, I have
Time is money.
Yeah,
yes, I have
and
a
I
friend
have
who
read
did
that
that.
as a definitive definition.
That's right. I have a friend who was responsible for that, for the math that makes that true in the financial world.
And
So they can calculate it. Yes.
it's ruining jobs. I mean, I'm reading more and more
Yeah.
in the news feed, which I always check just to sort of get the feel for the day of what's going through people's minds. And there's a lot of articles lately about, the great quitting,
Yeah.
just people wanting to be out of this work culture. And one of the primary reasons is this whole turn toward, I forget what they call it, there's a specific name, but it's where AI programs can actually track every single dot and tittle of your daytime activity, on your computer.
All your keystrokes and all that.
Everything is timed, and you get called to task if you miss the prescribed marks that you're supposed to meet for every minute of the day. Now, who would want to live like that? I would not want to live like that. One time I bid on doing some framing for a builder, just for the fun of it. I just would frame his building. And he was on me all the time. And he almost wouldn't pay me at the end because, of course, I was slower than these crack crews that, I would measure twice to cut once.
Yeah.
Whereas on a crack crew, you cut it and you make it work. That's where the big sledgehammer comes in.
Yeah.
It's when I said that, when the expression on your face, I thought, well, as usual, Don is right. um,
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
um,
that's why we use 28-ounce and 32-ounce framing hammers. They alone, not only could you put a 16 penny nail in with one swat, but they alone could move a lot of wood around.
Yeah.
um, sorry from yeah. One of the another sort of new insight in my efforts to try to tell the story is like Don's always talked about these machines that roll the stuff is really fast.
Right. I believe it.
And I actually like, well, how fast? They're really, really fast. So and this is a story about getting back to the people, right? And so these machines, these big rolling machines, they'll roll between 20 and 40 10-foot studs in a minute. And they're and what Don has figured out is he can ask them to make them 8'3" and 1/8 inch long. And they are really accurate. But so in that kind of harnessing that process, it is actually, I think, of allowing more time to have the craftsperson in the field, not doing other things. So Don says you still need somebody in the field who knows how to put it together, but it's taken out this part that's um
But
sometimes
it's more mechanical and not so artistic in a way.
well, what is it? I have to say, this is such a really insightful conversation for this thing that I keep trying to process through. and
Is what I'm
actually,
hearing Robert talk about is the art of building and how finessing, how being able to finesse allows you
Yeah.
a creativity that you don't get when it's very mechanical and you
I mean,
just put it
and
right.
I even kowtowed to the rigor of the system early on. I mean, before I really got going in the business, I was working on a commune out in Northern California. And so I was with this kid. I mean, I was a kid too. And he was on this platform that he managed to build. And we would sit there and look at things for 5-10 minutes. We'd chat. Then he said, well, I think this wall should be at this angle. I'd say, why? No, basically I was his helper. I was his gopher. So I said, okay, let's try it. And let's put a window here because I want to be able to look down at that, is basically in a tree. And, well, you can see where I'm going with this. We didn't get much done that day, and didn't get much done the next day.
okay, I do want to see a
It was a
photograph.
very interesting looking house. So I'm not, I quickly withdrew from that kind of craziness. But I mean, it was fun working with them.
Yeah. And actually, as in this, because I've been thinking about how you tell the story, and part of what I'm starting to realize is to tell the story that there's some things that Don has shown that you can do that are really surprisingly creative with steel.
Yeah, no, I mean, believe me, if I were working with steel, I would very quickly find out. I would push the envelope.
Well, this is
And I would very quickly find out ways to elaborate on the pattern. Because I love to do that.
yeah, this is the part about Don, he's still he's that old-fashioned guy like you. And in fact, he's a huge Frank Lloyd Wright fan, and so
Well, that kind of thinking and activity was absolutely encouraged at both of the Taliesin's, but particularly Taliesin West, because there was no winter. So people lived in these structures that they built all year round. It's a little difficult in the middle of summer, but they did. And yeah, I mean, the people were actually encouraged to understand building from the most, well, from the essences of what you were doing, of what a building was, what shelter was, the essence of, a window as a portal into the world. I mean, consider these, sit down and think about them for a while, just like this kid up in the, California redwood forest, considering the essences. And I'm really glad I did that with them, even though I knew I couldn't run a business that way.
well, I hope that these questions, it feels for me it's been very insightful in kind of what we've been talking about, but it's just some particularly, but I'm just going to share one picture also. Then, so
All right.
this is Don's figured out this way. You cut a standard stud, and you can bend it really easily, and which is so it's just a dome.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not interested in kind of a classical dome sort of shape, but there's a um there's just this strategy. There's a universe of what you can do with shapes within this one technique.
Oh,
Um,
Have you put it up yet?
Well, it's not mine. This is something he built. Oh, the picture? Yeah. It's
It's in the chat. I
oh,
forgot.
yeah, it's in the chat. I'm sorry. If you zoom in, you can see how he cut the pieces so he can bend it.
Yep.
Wow. That was done in the picture?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I'll show you one more. I'm sharing this because this is actually something that I'm really particularly interested in right now is to show that steel can be doesn't have to
Fluid.
be a box.
Yeah, fluid.
Yeah. And with much less time than wood.
Well, you do realize that bamboo is an incredible building product.
Yeah, but
They're
we're
they're
taught.
they're creating houses, an architecture that's truly
Yeah.
magnificent out in the Polynesian islands.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
And this actually reminds me of that.
that's actually a really interesting point. Yeah, it's but anyway, so that's well, this has been really. I thank you both of you because but I hope this is all part of this conversation about systems and how we are as human beings.
Yeah, I think that's the dance, is trying to figure out how we are as human beings. We keep trying things, and to see if it fits with us, if it helps us be more human, or takes us away from our humanity. And after a while, we'll know, and then we get to make another choice.
Yeah, because that would be the one comment I would make, that most of the modern world I see as totally anathema to, a dignity of even human life, much less any kind of animal or vegetable life.
Yeah, I think that's one of the big crises that we need to resolve and forgive ourselves for being in.
Yeah.
And forgive ourselves for what?
For being in, because it was our choices that put us here. So we have to forgive ourselves for doing that, and then
Oh,
do something.
I see that as my major job right now, is forgiveness
Forgiveness.
of my fellow man and that part of man that I am. And, in other words, forgiving myself, but
Yeah.
within mind how it's actually forgiving the entire human, almost the entire human race, because of what we've done to
Yeah.
this world.
And each other.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why we don't see some of the things we see, is that we don't feel entitled to the successes and the life that would create, that there's a self-image and uh, an inverse honesty that we somehow need to be penalized or pay for what we've done, um, in a perverse way, instead of forgiving ourselves. I'm reminded of a doctor who did not want to learn about things like the life vessel, because then he felt that he would be guilty for all the patients that he handled who didn't know that and who died.
Yeah.
I don't know how that's so conflated in my mind, but he would rather continue to kill.
What do you mean by the life vessel? Yeah, what's the
Well, life vessel is what I use to beat cancer. So it allows your body to vibrate at a vibration that is healthy for the cells, and those cells that can't vibrate at that rate disappear. So I had no cancer in my liver by the time I had the tumor taken out, because the vibrations just moved it out. Like I'm saying,
so the doctor he didn't want to believe that because then
he felt that he should be perfect, and that anything that wasn't perfect was a fault of his. And so he wanted to pretend he was doing the best he could do instead of actually doing. I don't know. It's just
But I just want to be clear. So for him to it's like for him to say, "Oh, what you have done, we can repeat that." But if I repeat it and have more success, then I have that will prove that I was wrong all these other times. So he
yes,
can't. So instead of growing with what he's learned, he's going to stay in what he knows because he.
still has the illusion of doing the best he can. Yeah,
Yeah, boy, that's.
isn't that? Yeah, yep.
So I think I know it's 11. Uh, so I think this I took Kathryn, I think you and I often talk about how to how to get people to think about the system, and this the idea of particles and particles start acting like waves, and that um there might be a way of there might be something to that.
No, I think music too also is a vehicle for some of that. Oh, I I wanted to talk to Joanna, but I didn't want to talk to her right now. Um, ah, she's been trying to be very helpful, and this is everything keeps getting in the way of that.
I think you're also right about music.
Yeah, I want to play with that more because I think there's something there to help people feel more comfortable with being different and together at the same time, and that it's not an either or, and that the togetherness is not the straitjacket that it sometimes felt to be.
Well, I probably could volunteer my wife to have. I think she
Oh, yeah,
would
she
like
will.
that conversation,
Yeah,
not
Yeah,
just as.
it's not just choirs either, or jazz. That's,
yeah,
bit that where this all comes to. I've been listening to a lot of classical music thanks to the benefits of using YouTube. You can get anything, find anything,
yeah.
absolutely anything. So the other day I was listening to Rachmaninoff's Second Symphony, and I'd listened to it a lot. But this particular one, the piano part was going to be played by Horowitz, and they start off with, him. I mean, he's in his 80s now. When this was done, he was at least in his 70s. Started off by him saying that he always improvised, the piano spot. And that was true. I could not recognize the
I
piano.
mean, a specific place in this Rachmaninoff symphony where he.
There was a piano part, a piano that was featured, and
So,
he played with such precise. I can't talk it. I can't describe it any other way than very precise improvisation, which he said he was going to do beforehand. They interviewed him, and it sounded wonderful and very different.
uh,
Not in the
different
not
from
in the
other
larger sense,
performances.
but in the details, it was just very different and wonderful.
Well, in some ways, I think this is exactly my wife's thesis. So her thesis, because she had to write a thesis for her official doctorate degree is in performance conducting. But prior to that, she spent 7 years or so working as a PhD candidate, I guess, for musicology. So she approached her performance degree with a lot more academic rigor than most people with. But her thesis is it's within classical music are these very important compositions there's some points here and there, and there's a few points. There's a few places that are quite famous for the way, like in the pieces she used. One of the pieces she used was a Mozart piece, but there's a couple points that people who like her know that there's a little bit of ambiguity in the way it was written, and in these points that people like her know are, there's whatever there's, and so she actually what she did is she listened to several performances and analyzed those specific bars to see how people, composers and conductors perform those ambiguities. I don't know if that's
Yes.
Yeah.
and and I offer that also, Kathryn, because this is something kind of reveals kind of her pursuit of trying to understand ambiguity and how people work with it
Mhm. And allow it.
and allow it.
Yeah, it's the emergence that really is sort of always a thrill, both for the in terms of music performance for the performer and for the audience. I mean, that's part of jazz is this emergence thing that just kind of happens that nobody can plan or know what it is going to be. It just happens because you're playing freshly and newly with each other in a different way. Um, I have a friend who wrote a whole book about that. How do
Mhm.
you get emergence in groups? How do you allow it to happen with groups of people? And I think that's part of what we've been talking about. That's that magic that happens when you're in integrity and everybody is just doing and responding in the moment. That emergence happens just because everything is new and you're not doing the same thing you did before. You're not even remembering the same thing you did before. You just do what's right, and everybody else is doing the same thing, and it's suddenly different. It just has emerged, and that's precious. I mean, that's just a precious thing, and to create. For me, that's what life is about. And to create the conditions that support life, that's what it means to create the conditions that allow for that kind of freshness and um, showing up of the essence of all of the participants at any one particular time, and to be kind of in awe and to be able to see and watch that, to know that that's happening. I mean, what else could we want to do? You just get enthralled with life. I think that's what whale song is. They're just floating around there for years and years and years, hundreds of years. They just floating out in that liquid and sing.
Or,
Yeah.
or I watched a crow once. This was in just above Marin County, just above one of the towns down there. Um, at the
And
top ridge, there's quite a wind all the
yeah,
time. And
yeah.
so I'm sitting there feeling that wind, no one else around. And I saw this crow come up, and it was funny. I thought he was just going to go flying through, but he sort of got lifted up. And I could just remember thinking, I know what's going through his mind. He's saying, that was cool. Because he stayed there. I mean, I don't remember how long. It seemed like minutes. It probably was, well, it was probably at least 1 minute,
Wow.
which is a lot of time, 60 seconds. I mean, and he just
Yeah.
played, dipping, and just played up and down, dipping, and then suddenly he shot off.
Well, whether it's a minute or 2 minutes probably depends on what you were smoking that day, probably too.
That's a possibility.
um,
But it reminded me that, we're not the only creature that can
Yeah,
really enjoy the rhythms of the world.
yeah.
yeah,
Beautiful.
I like the I mean, this has all been really great. Kathryn, you said like allow that ambiguity. I mean, that's really a theme we keep coming back to.
Mhm. Yeah.
And the ambiguity, like there's seemingly an ambiguity in systems thinking. are people, I that's just a question. Do people, the stumbling block is there, people see it, I guess I'm equating ambiguity to, it's not a series of parts that are all neatly defined.
Well, yeah, I would think so.
And allowing for change. See, life changes. It has to change. I mean, if it's composed of thousands, trillions, megatrillions of living things, always making a decision right now that's going to impact the people around it, the creatures around it, who also have to make then another decision to deal with that. How can it not change?
Well, this is so back to Robert's, the proton gun through his slits.
Yeah, yeah.
It's because we don't live in a world where there's just one slit. There's lots of holes, and all
Right.
this stuff comes at you. And the idea that you're going to put all the stuff that comes at you into one neat little package.
Oh, how dull, how boring, yeah. And that's what death is all about. And we're so busy making that happen. We want it as stable as we can get it. And that's not
Predictable,
thing.
yeah.
Yeah, we'll settle for predictable, but we would kind of get to be.
Well, it's been good. I'm gonna need to go.
Okay, all right. And I have to go too. I gotta call Joanna back. So.
But next week.
One other observation, Robert, when you first came in,
Yes,
the sun was coming through your clerestory or something,
yeah.
and
Well,
you were like Jesus coming in, like your light. There was this.
and I had to sit back out of it because I could barely see.
Well, I have to say, from this vantage point, there was quite a dramatic effect.
Yeah, I may be putting up the cardboard to block it, pretty soon.
Yeah.
Well, it looks good on you. It looked good.
Can't see.
Essence was revealed.
There are certain recurring Zoom meetings that I have to do here at 1:00 in the afternoon, and I can't see, so I've got to block it.
Right.
In fact, one of them's this Sunday, so I got to remember to find the old cardboard and get it up there. Okay, see you later.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.